What if you lived your life with a focus of pushing it to the limit in everything you do? What if that drive led to joining the United States Marines and experiencing a whirlwind career within your time in service? What if a situation in combat led to being the recipient of a Silver Star for bravery and actions performed on the battlefield while under extreme circumstances? What if you took that same intensity and focused it post-service to build a career as a filmmaker and cinematographer? Join me as I talk with Marine veteran Ethan Nagel about his time as a scout sniper and how he is actively pursuing his vision within the film industry post-service. This is Veteran Success Story. Welcome to another episode of Veteran Success Story. Today, I'm joined with Marine veteran Ethan Nagel to talk about his time in service, but we touch on that briefly, but really what we are talking about is his passion and what his time in service and what he learned there led into what he's doing now within the film industry. So I know you guys are going to love this episode. Honestly, it was an honor to be able to sit down and talk with him. But I also got to say, guys, please follow and subscribe. Hit that button, whether you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Those are the major ones. We're across the board, though. I mean, it's on iHeart. We stream across everything. So whatever you're listening on and wherever you tune in, just hit follow or subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps the show out and it helps me be able to keep putting these episodes out. And I promise that if you guys continue to do that, I will continue to try to up the ante on this show and create something that really is better with improvement every time, and to create a picture for you guys and to create something that you guys can glean from and pull apart and use in your everyday life, but also enjoy to listen to, because some of the guests I have on here, they're just some phenomenal people. And quite honestly, Ethan is no exception on that one. So I hope you guys enjoy the episode. We're going to get right into it. And thank you for listening. This is yet again another Veteran Success Story. Today on Veteran Success Story, I'm joined with Ethan Nagel. Ethan, I mean, it's good to have you on, man, but I guess like just the accolades and everything else, you got the Into the Breach, which is your new project behind you, and just everything you have going on, man. I've loved it. Watched the 9line podcast stuff. I mean, we did one on there before. I like the premise of the new show, just everything you've put in there, what you've built up post-service and what you've been working on. It really shows, man. It looks good.
Thanks, bro. I appreciate you having me on, and thanks for all that.
Hey, you know, it is. It's just putting these things together, and I don't think I knew what I was getting myself into when I started doing this. Like, hey,
yeah.
I just get on here, press record, and it's a heck of a lot more than all that.
It is. Fortunately, I had a bit of experience with podcasting. Actually, about 5-6 years ago, I started my own. I think I got like 6 episodes in and COVID hit, or we had moved and then COVID hit. I think I'd actually probably close to 9-10 episodes, and it was a pain. It was very done haphazardly. You know, it was for fun, yeah. But it's like when fun turns into a lot of work and you don't quite have a lot into it. Like I think people think like, oh, I'll just throw on the cameras and then it's done and we'll edit. Like, yeah, you know, I had 2 different camera systems, and if you're a camera nerd, you're like, oh, these are different frame rates or they're different, you know, hertz rates. One's shooting at 24, one's at 23.98. Then the audio is not capturing correct, so the audio drift over 30-40 minutes keeps dripped. So you're literally adjusting audio. It's not correct by the end. You see every hour basically you have to readjust, and then we didn't have the auto cutting features like we do now, so it had to be done manually. So I had to go, and it was an absolute nightmare. So, and then I did some other podcasts just off to the side in general. Like working with Black Rifle, they had done a bunch, and so kind of seeing the switchers, like how do we do it? What's a more streamlined way to do it? So when and then 9line, streamlining that a bit more, even though it was video, and then do enough research, and then committing finally to mine, which is in-house, but like making sure we keep the workload down and to streamline to make sure, hey, this is the pipeline, and kind of get everything going so it, you know, I'm not making any money. So it's all, you know, right now it's just like everybody else though. It's like any other business you're doing, you know, it's like, hey, you're gonna have to put a lot of, you know, work up front, especially out of your own pocket or your own time to kind of get it moving and grooving. So yeah, it's been a trip. It's been awesome. That's just one little aspect, it's like, yeah, but it's great though. It actually helps my creative side on like just flexing muscle, even though it's the same thing every day. It's just the repetitiveness of like, hey, get it edited, get it done, get the discipline, but also like it is fun just to like have something to put into the editor and finish and do something with it. And then, have it go out, even though it's not like a crazy artistic cinematic project. It's just awesome to be able to have that repetition go. Every 2 weeks something goes out, but then every 2 to 3 days there's a clip. So there's a lot of avenues. So it's been fun. It's been a blast. So I appreciate people are noticing the effort.
No, I loved seeing the progression too. And really, I think too is that military aspect of it. We were talking before we got on and stuff. I know there's like kind of almost points of performance that they put along the way of these things. Hey, I think the stat you threw out there, I'll check it out, but I believe it. If you can make it towards 20 episodes out there, chances are you're probably going to stick with it for X amount. You're going to have a long running show for a while, because there's that grind, and you have to have the perseverance. You also got to figure it out. I mean, that was when I started out on the guest side of things, and it only took me 50 plus to actually start getting out the right story and not looking like an idiot on camera. So
yeah, no, I know. I just think too is I actually like going on people's shows more than my own, because then, I'm the one that's in there like, oh, I got to keep, you're always working, I know you're working right now. Like, what's the next question? What do we do? Like I've been on that side. So it's like, especially when you're in person, you're like,
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. So it's, but it is fun talking, but you're also trying to make sure that you're, doing things correctly. You're not your habits and other stuff like that, trying to constantly improve. So yeah, it is. It's still a trip, Yeah.
It's funny because I think it was episode 2. I had Jack Murphy on, and I think it was before I started it. He pretty much said the same thing. He's like, this is refreshing for a change going on a show. And he's like, don't fuck it up, and afterwards, like going back and re-listening to number 2, I'm like, man, I really fucked it up.
Well, that's the thing is you're going to, I already got you look at the comment section of mine too. Everyone's ripping me up and down, or actually it's like love and hate, but it's like, what is this guy doing, this interviewer, and then there's other people like, great show, I love it, so, but there's always room for improvement, just like anything else, and I agree. I mean, it is a lot more fun to be like, oh yeah, I'm going on this podcast, because I did, other ones, and I still plan to go on some other bigger ones. So you're like, oh yeah, it is nice. Now I can just like, chatty Cathy talk. And that's what people want, whereas when you're hosting, you're trying to like go back and forth. Like, where do I chime in? What can give context? Or we let this story play out for the next 7-8 minutes, which is a lifetime. I mean, it really, which is great, but that's what you're having the guests for. I think for me, like, it's just been having the guest make sure they tell their story, and I've gotten a bit better at. But then there's podcasts that you just have your buddy on, and you're like, dude, let's just bullshit and have a good time, So you kind of got to switch tones on what the subject of that podcast is going to be, or that show, because like having, and also too, sometimes they're combined. Sometimes you're good friends, but they have a good story that they need to tell, and you are having a good time shooting the shit. It's going to be different, more informal, but then you're like, okay, now we got to lock in here for the next 20-30 minutes of, this significant event in your life, or how we got here, and have them fully explain it, so yeah, it's fun. It's been a blast. A lot of work, but I feel like but it feels like it's going somewhere, you're not going in circles, and building and now kind of seeing that side of it, to be honest with you. I mean, like, you've been seeing it for so long, for the last like 10-15 years, I've been paying attention to podcasting since like 2013. And then to finally kind of be like, yes, well, yeah, I guess it'd be almost 12 years now to be like, yes, is how we do it. But it's just like everybody else, like, hey, yeah, everyone's got a podcast, everyone's got a YouTube channel, everyone's got this and this, but how are you going to stick it out? How are you going to make it what are you going to do to make it, one, profitable, because that's what you want to do, to keep doing it, make it successful, whatever you measure that success at. Maybe you aren't super profitable, but if it pays for itself, then it's a break even, it's worth it, and then you can grow and grow, and continue to improve. But yeah, because it's like, you just don't want to end up, I don't say end up is not bad, but you don't want to end up 7-8 years from now with a whole library and they're still only getting like 20 views or 100 views on your stuff. Like, a bit
It's the same
depressing,
same
like,
20.
yeah, you want to continually improve, or, and stuff like that. So it's been an awesome, it's been a trip, stepping into the, I'd say podcast space, but I kind of want to stay like show space. Like, hey man, you're not just talking, you're trying to do a little bit more and more and more each time. And that's my goal with Into the Breach is one, getting people's stories out there that aren't as heard. We're very veteran focused, as you, me, we're veteran focused, but I'm sure, and everyone's like, some people are like, well, I'm not a veteran, I have a story. I was like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I know it feels like it's veteran because that's my community, that's who I know. But
Yeah.
my goal is to then expand into, honestly, regular conversations. It's, yes, that's the theme Into the Breach, but like, dude, talking with entrepreneurs that aren't veteran, that have built really good companies, or
Yep.
guys that are not veterans that have scaled Everest. I did have Brian, Dickinson on. He did Everest. He was a Navy swimmer, but regardless, a rescue swimmer. But regardless, if he wasn't one, I still want that story. Like, I'd love to see that, tell that, or other people who have just climbed Everest that aren't vets. Like, it's a crazy feat, or divers or stuff like that. It is veteran heavy, obviously, because we know that community, and whatnot, but it'll definitely 100% expand into further out. But yeah, it's been a blast. It's been fun, especially, and also it's great to, build that network up, and have people like watch your stuff. Like, you spend a lot of time in lighting, your stuff looks great, and people have commented on mine as well. So it does give a warm and fuzzy to like people outside of our circle. If I contact them and they actually respond, they're like, oh, all right, this isn't like some weirdo. I'm like flying out some weirdo's house, and, in
But they
Minnesota.
are, but they're not. I know
There
what you
are
mean.
and they're not. Yeah, I had Brian out, and I'm like, yeah, we were joking because we came down to my basement, but we have a pretty big basement, so I built a bar, and it's so it's not, people aren't like, oh, this is some dungeon. Like, we got big windows, so they feel more comfortable. And then I'm like, welcome to the studio, and it's like, oh, that's what I see on YouTube, like, and he's like, oh, I thought it was gonna be like, he didn't say that. He's like, oh, it could have been like Silence of the Lambs down here, or something. I was like, yeah, I gotta throw you in a hole, So it's but it's I've talked to other guys though that have built studios and rented spaces. And, I've talked to him about, I was like, yeah, eventually I'd like to get to that point. They're like, don't, they're like, if you start making a lot of money and you're good with your space, they're like, it's perfect. You can walk downstairs, like it. And if you're making money off of it and you got your buddies and you're kind of secure and you have guests, they're like, just keep it like that. Cause they start dumping money into their studio now, which costs money to rent and blah, 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 and that goes on. I think you can do a lot in your house. Even if you do have guests like myself, like, you can make the room, you can figure, people that come in, you can figure it out, if you want to go down that route. You don't have to, like you said, video conferencing calls are great too. We're doing one right now. So, but definitely, like, the quality of things, it helps a lot. And by the way, you'll see people across YouTube when they get better, they're amateur when they start. And then suddenly, they have, they have what it looks like, what people are now expecting from YouTube channel or from channels, but also from set. It's kind of funny because, it used to be, hey, we're just hanging on couches talking, but some do that, but they might have bigger followings because they're bigger celebrities, but like that start doing it. But like when you're kind of younger, or not younger, but when you're starting out new, you're almost trying to punch above your weight. And the way that you can do that is how things look.
It's
you
and
can
it's
control
one
that. Yeah.
small thing every time too.
Exactly.
Like, just pulling it out. Okay, what can I do better this time? That's a little different.
Exactly.
Case in point, one a few further back. I guess from when this one is, because it's a few weeks out that I go put him through the post process and stuff. But where he pointed out he's editor in chief at a paper. And we were talking, and afterwards I sent him the promotional stuff, and he's like, no, everything looks amazing. He's like, but I got one small critique. You're spelling it success here above the portion here. I'm like, son of a, you gotta be kidding. How did I miss that?
Mm-hmm.
It's just overlooked because it was so small on where the post-production was. And it's like, I just put out 20 episodes for success story, with it spelled wrong. It's hilarious to know that.
Yeah, I know exactly. No, I know how that feels. I've done it with graphics myself. They're like, you spelled it wrong. I was like, oh God, and I have to like go back and like sometimes you just can't fix it. Like, it depends on what you're doing. Like, I can maybe replace that, or sometimes they let you, but sometimes when you're locked in, you're just locked in. you know, and the worst sometimes is like on Spotify, I have to like replace a show because somebody wants something cut out, or, you know, I haven't had anything crazy yet. This one that I'm working on right now, my buddy, we're keeping it up, but we have to take out a significant amount where I have to basically upload my Spotify. But luckily, I mean, it sucks. I'm so losing out on 130 views, but you know, I'm not losing out on like 3,000 or something like that or whatever. But yeah, it is, you know, you something, things like that. You're like, oh shit, you know, that's not going to be good. But, yeah, no, I know how that feels. You know, you throw that out there, and then, you know, I've done it. It's actually sometimes embarrassing. On like my mini docs or cinematic documentaries, I'll like throw it out there. And they're like, you spelled this wrong. I'm like, oh my God. Like, all right. You know, like it's
And then
like,
you see how easy it is because
oh
you
yeah,
picked it up. You know you were somebody that's picked it up at one point while watching either mainstream or something, and you laugh at the, you know, look what they missed, those
yeah,
idiots, and now it's like,
yeah.
oh man, that was really easy to do.
Yeah, yeah, and especially as an editor, filmmaker, like I see the flaws instantly.
Yeah.
Instantly. And there's actually a really funny clip. It went around probably like 3-4 years ago, and it was on like the Filmmaker meme pages, you know, that I follow. But it was pretty horrific. Anderson Cooper, whoever shot, they were doing this interview or something, and they didn't put a lookup table, or basically something that adds color to the S log. And
Yeah.
this might be out of some realm for some people, but if you ever see footage that sometimes it'll be all washed out gray. Well, that's where you start to do the color grade.
Yeah.
Most of the time people just they don't do the S log, or what they'll do is they put a LUT on it, a lookup table, and it just basically makes it look like normal.
Yeah.
Well, Anderson Cooper didn't do it. And so it's really funny. There's like a segment, and they're running it live on TV. It's just washed out gray. And it's super funny. And someone's yelling at the TV, like, put a LUT on it, Anderson, put a LUT on it, you know? And it's just like horrific looking. And clearly somebody overlooked it, or it's like it was live. They forgot to press the button to put, you know, the whatever feed to come up. So even the big people, you know, even the big dogs make mistakes, you know? And
Yeah.
I've seen it on commercials when S-log footage became a thing back probably like 10 years ago, or when it really started coming into play. I've seen it on, like you could tell they handed it to the editor, which I'm sure did a light color grade. And they put it out on the, like Ford commercials, like, you know, like big time commercials. It still looked good. Like the framing and the subject matter, it'll look good, but you look at it and you're like, why is it so gray? Well, if you don't work with S-log footage, you have to do what's called the S curve. It's simple. It takes like 2 minutes, but at the time, a lot of people didn't know how to do that, or they just didn't understand. And it was like what, and it was all in the editor. You didn't have to like get some specialized equipment. It was just like, oh, I just have to go one step deeper into editing to do this. And so you can do color on the color, basically like saturation and contrast, whatever, you know, as on the editing page for, you know, if you want to adjust some of the color. But if you want to really get all of it, you have to do the S curve. You have to like really push and pull and whatnot. Well, you can tell somebody like maxed out all the settings on, but it still looked like kind of gray, washed out, and they were just like, "Fuck, I don't know." Like, put it out there, you know. And all it takes is just one more step, and it's like, boop, boop. Okay, I would have fixed it. And believe me, I've done it with guys that were a little bit older. I'm like, why is this footage like? You know, I've seen it on their reel, and they're like friends, but they're older. They're like, you know, 15, 20 years older, and they start using this stuff. If you don't know, if you're not an editor, a lot of DPs aren't editors, so it's like, you don't know. Yeah, it's like you just don't know, you know? And so you don't know what you don't know. And, you know, I actually grabbed their footage one time and like re-edited for like some other stuff. And it's like, and they're like, oh my God, that looks great. And, yeah, it pops, you know? And they're like, I didn't, you know? So yeah, it's you know, that's the nerd side of me talking. But yeah, it's even the big dogs make mistakes, you know? And so all you got to do is, you know, correct that mistake or just continually improve, you know? So.
And that's where we're going to go from the segue. This is perfect.
Yeah.
Because we're going to segue into who is this guy, right? You've done a few before. I know I've seen I think I was listening to the Whiskey and Windage one, but you've done one with your story about the Silver Star story. You know, I think it was Vet Center and
Black Rifle,
Black
Vet
Rifle. Center.
Yeah, Antihero now. Antihero did a long one. We ended up taking most of the segment. But yeah, I think that's the three that I've discussed it, you know, the most.
Yeah.
On. Yeah.
Have you ever, matter of fact, and this is just something, curiosity, because I did warn this to some of the other guys, and I heard it come from, I think it was Tom Satterley was talking about it on the Sean Ryan show,
Mhm.
about how talking about some of those experiences and stuff, it started to kind of be like draining on him
Mhm.
in that way. And he was noticing like periods of afterwards. And I kind of started looking at it within myself of, like, are you a little bit maybe like more irritable when you come back from something, or if you got to be on a show and kind of bringing this stuff up? Because I know the book did. Sort of took a break from looking at any of that stuff for a while after I was done when we were in the editing process. I mean, have you ever experienced any of that end or?
No, I mean, not yet, because I've only done it like 3 times over spaced out over like a year apiece. Um, Emotionally, I get it. Like I was talking with Brian Dickinson about this because I mean he did the Everest and still it's still very traumatic, like the post-traumatic stuff, or even guys like Navy rescue swimmers like dealing with a lot of like helo crashes. That's still PTSD ridden. Like I think a lot of people think that you got to be shot, blown up, go to war to get that. It's like you don't. Like a helicopter crash can fuck you up for the rest of your life. Like, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Or like, oh, a helicopter landing as a civilian or even as a rescue swimmer, like that could be horrific, or generalities, anything else. Um, yeah, for me, I mean, it's like it's a weird thing for me right now. It's everyone wants to hear the story, and everyone I talk to is like, you need to get this out there. You need to, one for the infantry guys, two for the men you serve with, and it's a therapeutic in some ways, and other ways, yeah, it can be a bit emotionally drain. It's emotionally draining,
Yeah.
that's for sure. Every time I talk about it, it is draining you know and because you're recounting so many events and it's a significant part of my life. I mean, like, beyond just the event itself, it like and you also kind of like think about how it impacted you, and what my mentality was then, how I performed under fire. So I'm very proud of what I did, but it was very tragic. We all nearly got overran, and you walk away. Like, I was at one point, I thought it was lights out, and then
Yeah.
you're dead, and now I'm back. And and on top of that, the mentality I had in those moments was, I will die here, like, and that's okay. Not only is it okay, I will die as a warrior. I will die on this pile of brass, and you will remember me for that. Like, especially in the infantry, you want to die a beautiful death. You kind of have that mentality of like, if I die, I hope I die going down swinging. And I was in those moments, and I still get chills even right now. I'm talking about it, thinking about it, to be like, yes, I've been shot, I've been wounded twice at this point. I can feel the overpressure of all the bullets around me. I'm holding back, multiple, Taliban from trying to encircle us, like going down to pistols, working on medical, and coordinating, coordinating the QRF, and then, coordinating cover fire, and just all these things, came down to that kind of an apex of a moment. Whether, do you have what it takes or you don't? And
Yeah.
and even ever since then, even before I was awarded the Silver Star, I just kind of, you carry that with you mentally. So I'm very proud of that moment, but at the same time, it's just very emotionally draining. And, essentially I was, worked on Vose as he was dying. And then I've also had other experiences where, you can't save everyone. And I think that just builds up over time, because everyone wants the, oh my God, we got everyone off and everyone's safe. It's like, no, not everyone's coming home alive. I think that's really hard. When you're younger, you can accept that. When you're going in and out of war, you accept that. Like my friends that have been killed in war, like, or in combat, I think of them differently opposed to someone who dies tragically in a car accident.
Mhm.
We all knew what we signed up for, and we're all okay with that. And so if I was killed overseas and I don't, like, and sometimes, dude, there's a timeline, however you want to think about it, there's a timeline. I don't walk away from that. There's a timeline where I'm dead. I'm the
Yep.
second one that got killed that day, and you don't think about it too hard, you know, but at that same point, you're like, hey, you make your peace with God, and you're okay with death. And, I think, like I said, I think it's more emotionally draining when you're talking about it,
Yeah.
and you want to do it justice. You want to do it, for the guys that were down there. Like, I think for me, years later, after I've talked about it only 3 times, I'm like, already right away, I'm like, I need to go I talk with Shuey, who was next to me or close to me. They were like a few, like probably 10, 15 meters away. I want to go and talk with him again. I've met up with him. He's a good friend of mine, but I need to talk with Stovall. I want to get in depth. And, and people have been like, right when I was awarded the Silver Star in 2013, they're like, you going to write a book? And I'm like, no, silent professional. I did what I had to do that day. Everyone around me would have done the same thing. That is what it is, now that we gotten older, a lot of people are kind of like, hey man, like it's okay to talk about. One, it's okay to talk about. Two, it's okay to talk about it on podcasts, and it's okay to get the word out there. Like I've said, I've had a lot of support from the infantry boys, not to get too much into the veteran culture, but they're, not every, the soft stories are great. Everyone's happy. I mean, it's, hey, you hear another story about a Green Beret or SEALs or whatever. That's totally cool. But I think a lot of the infantry guys don't feel like they can tell their stories, which are well above and beyond on a day-to-day basis than most, I don't want to say most soft operations, but it's a different type of culture.
Yeah, than a lot of them.
Because they don't have the Trident or they don't have the SF backing. And by the way, that community absolutely respects the infantry. It's just sometimes the infantry guys don't feel like they can say that because they don't have a tab or whatever. Whereas honestly, in most cases, those guys have seen more action than any of those other units, and the life was much, much harder. So, I've had guys talk to me about that, especially after coming out more public. And honestly, kind of now I feel like a little bit more about, we talked about this before hopping on the podcast. I feel like a little bit of my not my burden, but my duty a little bit more is to shine light more onto the infantry, and to give more, more love to the infantry boys. And so with my story as a Silver Star recipient, it's not a Medal of Honor, it's in that weird category where like, it's well above and beyond anything the regular,
I was gonna say, like, I know another Silver Star guy.
Yeah,
like,
but it's not a Medal of Honor. So you're like in this ether, like where everyone over here cares, but no one else here cares, but they're all within the, so it's like there's no book deals or money or speaking tours, but everyone here is like, you should do that. It's like, well, but then over here, no one cares. So you're, even though it's a big deal, it's still, but so you're in this weird ether and you're just like, well, I guess you're like grinding away what you should be doing. Like you shouldn't, rest on your laurels. And, I'm not saying that, like, oh my God, I need a free ticket now wherever I go by any means, none of that. And, especially when I was awarded that, I was like, nope, I don't want anybody, in my, my reputation precedes me. And, my actions at that moment in time when you're interacting with me is how you will judge me, not by what I did in the past, And so you always have to continue to improve where you go, like if I'm going to be a filmmaker, I want to be the best. I want to be the nicest guy. I want to be the hardest working in the room, and that's how they'll remember me. When I went contracting on a WIPS contractor or CIA static contract, I want them to know I'm reliable. I want them to know that I will do the mission, that I do it and I do it very well, and I take it seriously. And that I can interact with other people. I can be a leader, when I need to be a leader, and I can be, a trigger puller when I need to be a trigger puller. And so, so I've carried that, with me, but nowadays I'm a lot obviously more comfortable talking about it. Opened up a lot more. What I'd like to do is, it's like the first time I talked about it publicly was nuts. Cause I did on Black Rifles podcast. Cause one of, Logan there was like, he was another Marine sniper. He's like, hey, you're on staff. I want you to tell your story. And I was like, sounds good. And I like reread my after action. And then there's stuff in there that didn't make the after action. So it's like a lot of stuff comes back to my memory. And it's just like everything else, like these things happen, but sometimes I forget what in chronological order it happened, and so you're just trying to make sure you do it justice. You obviously don't want to be called out, all this other stuff. And especially the guys that are with you. I never want any of the guys that were with me in that firefight to be like, yeah, he's full of shit. That didn't happen. In fact, I downplayed it sometimes, especially, in later years, and other guys are like, no, dude, it was worse than that, so I'd rather err on that side than to try to, blow it up into something that it wasn't. I'm very proud of it. It's that dividing feeling where like people are like, dude, because I've had people come up to me and be like, this is a Medal of Honor. Why is this not a Medal of Honor? I've legit have generals talk to my friends while at the ceremony. The general that awarded me goes, why is this not a Navy Cross? Yeah. And so, and like that, I'm not saying, hey, this needs to be upgraded, but it does give me a little bit of like, I don't always say like a boost, where you feel good. You're like, people like they recognize it, and the people in my community that I respect recognize that, and they're not saying it to like blow smoke. Like they don't throw that around lightly, and so I guess it's just kind of, trying to be humble, but also, use it as a tool in the toolbox to help spread the word about infantry, to help the other guys' stories. It does, but it does help in some regards too, like me and you talking, or when I talk to other people, or when there's heavy hitters, like say in the podcast space, dude, they Google me and it's like, boom. And they're like, oh my God, absolutely. We want you on, yes, we'd love to talk with you. Yes, absolutely. I will work into our schedule, and so I guess maybe it still feels weird, but I've been more comfortable with, I don't know, like I would say, like, it still feels very weird to be like, hey, I'm a Silver Star recipient, but also trying to use it to be like, hey, I'm trying to platform something else, not just me, but, other veterans and the infantry guys, and sometimes you have to use that to like get the respect of the soft podcasters, or whatever, even though it feels weird, you don't want to use it to that extent. It's a dividing thing, you're trying to stay humble. You're trying to, be a silent professional, but in that same point, what those people want. And it also helps give you like a credential, it's like when look, it's almost the same as like, oh, I'm special forces, or I'm a SEAL, or I'm team 6, or tier 1, I'm a Del. It's in that same realm, of like, oh yeah, it's like an automatic, like, okay, yeah, maybe we'll take
it's a hashtag.
It's a hashtag. Yeah. So anyways,
No,
I guess
I dealt with the same thing on the book end too. I mean, it's literally like, hey, this story doesn't need to be told, like, yet there's nagging in the back of your head kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you're like, you don't want to be the one to write it, or, it's like, no, man, that stayed out there until it was forced to a point of, all right, this story needs to get out there at this point. Yeah, that's a tricky thing. It is.
Yep. And my good friend of mine that was here, Luke, we've been talking ever since he came out in December, and I've been wanting to write a book, but it wasn't about my Silver Star battle. I was like, I've always wanted to write a book about the ETTs, because it was a very small contingent of Marines for 5 years. That was it. It lasted for 5 years, and it was over. It was probably about 4 rotations. It, produced myself, Silver Star, and also Dakota Meyer, the first Medal of Honor recipient, in the Marine Corps for the GWAT. So it's not, I don't want it to be about me. Well, and so my buddy was like, he was on the first rotation. He was on 5-1. So he was there in the beginning, and then we had one more rotation after us, and then they killed it. And so we could cover that ground pretty easily. So yeah, and that's, I think it's like trying to frame it correctly, and
be a cool story to tell. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's like you're covering, it's almost like a point of history book,
Yeah.
And obviously I'm sure we're going to go into detail about the Silver Star battle, because Dakota Meyer already has a book about his stuff. So there's like a hook, it's like hook is the Silver Star battle, but the majority of the book is about these Marines that were underfunded, underpaid, under-equipped, and did this amazing mission that was basically handed to special forces, but couldn't handle the mission. So then they took it over, helped relieve the pressure. And, that's what Marines do, whether we like it or not. And so that's something I take a lot of pride in, and taking that amount of responsibility. But I wanted to shed light on that. And so that to me, so we're kind of in the talks, and we need help essentially, it's like, I mean, like I can't do it alone. He can't do it alone. So together we can do it, and kind of do a hybrid media project, but also get the ball rolling on the book. And whatnot. So he sat, not in a bad way. He I shouldn't say it in a bad way. He had a heart attack, but he didn't have a stroke. He had a heart attack. My buddy Luke, and so he's obviously going to be medically retired from the firefighter. Nothing he didn't stroke out or anything. He kind of was like, what's going on? And then they had to put a stent in his heart. They cleared it out. Other than that, he's like super healthy. He's like one of those like East Coast animals that drinks, and just like somehow he's like in can do crazy feats, and you're like, you look at him, you're like, what, but he does amazing stuff. But yeah, so now he has the time, and so we've been talking like, okay, let's get this thing rolling. And sometimes too, I don't feel as I hate to say, and it's not the right term, but like the cashing in, when I don't feel like I'm cashing in on anything, because the war has been over and it's been 15 years, so who gives a shit? So I feel almost a little bit more, I feel better about writing about it, because it's not in the moment that when everyone's trying to make their buck. Like now is the time to do it, because in my psychology, whether it's right or wrong, It's like, okay, cool. Yeah. No one cares about this subject anymore. People still do, but in my head, I'm like, yeah, it's over. No one cares. Now let's do it. Cause now I don't feel like I'm being some egotistical maniac,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, you're not cashing in on it.
yeah, I'm
Like, I
not
mean,
cashing in on it.
it's unfortunate because people
If
do.
it works, that's great. I'm glad it does. But I don't expect to be like, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to make a bunch of money and then I'm going to go on tour and I'm going to do this and
Yeah,
like,
exactly. The
you know,
important part is telling the story
yeah,
and like
exactly. Like,
getting those names out there. That
dude,
was one of the biggest things, is having, I mean, that dedication page where it started off, that was one thing that was super important to the guys I was with. They're like, hey man, freaking the Fallen, there has to be a page of the Fallen, and that was Andrew Bragg, kind of the same thing as well with theirs. They kind of took, they sort of even took it a step further. It was kind of cool in the inner jacket there to where he actually changed the way Casemate did stuff, and they actually had pictures of the Fallen that were attached with them. So it's been neat to see that progress, but make sure that keep that azimuth of telling these stories, but telling them, keeping those names alive.
yep.
Um,
Exactly. And that's why and not only the names, keep the names alive, but the mission that they did and the mission,
yeah,
from speaking from my experience of the ETTs, no one knew we existed.
yep.
They always thought that we were always in the wrong camis because they were like, they were like, why are you not in your deserts? I'm like, because we're out here. And they're like, what are you talking about? There's no
Yeah.
Marines, in RC East. I'm like, well, there is, and we're doing some more pretty wild shit, and then everyone thinks I'm MARSOC. So when I got the Silver Star, we were big boy, big boy rules. We had a special forces major take leadership of our team. And so we were running around in old BDU camis, looking like the Afghans, growing our beards out, but we were also,
You were running fit.
yeah, man. It was painted our rifles. So everyone looks at the photos and they're like, oh, he's MARSOC. What MSOB was he with? Like, oh, he's clearly this. And it's like, no, man, I was just a regular old grunt. We just got to do some really fun stuff, but, yeah, so that's what I mean. I agree with that. I think it's just one of those things of like, hey, getting their names out there, getting who else was out there, especially the Silver Star battle. For me, it's been 15 years, and 16 years now, going on 16 years, that, I want to know what else happened out there. Like me and Shui talked with each other, but I want to know about the, and by the way, I think that's kind of the shame of it. We all kind of walk away like it happened and we walk away.
Yeah.
Like my team leader that, and my buddies that were on the ETT that fought their way up the valley, the National Guard boys, like what's their story? I know they got kills going all the way up, and they're fighting their way up. The ambush that took place on the very southern end, the Kiowa pilots, their perspective, so it would be an amazing thing to hunt down those angles. And even like Stovall, I haven't talked to Stovall in years, and he was the other guy that was with us, and get a little bit more on Aflag's side. And Gunny Rogers, I caught up with a few months later, happenstance when I was a contractor, and then we caught up. But again, that's been years, he was a great dude. But he was the other Marine that was with me, but they were our replacements. And so I didn't even know who he was. And he happened to be on that patrol. And I talk about him. I thought he was dead. He was the one I thought I was going to have to drag over the wall. And, so it's just like getting the stories and perspectives from all those guys, and yeah, and because they were throwing grenades, they were doing wild shit 15 meters from me. I didn't even know where it was happening, and the only reason I know that I ran through gunfire and RPGs were flying over my head was because Jared Chu had told me, like I didn't know.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah, heat of the moment. That's the thing. So many different vantage points because you don't know. Like in the heat of it, it is just sheer chaos controlled chaos, but you can't see all of it. You can only see your lane.
exactly. You got your blinders on, like you're, and so, he told me that like the next day or that day, same day, we had a few drinks back at the SF compound. He's like, dude, I look back at you and fucking bullets are kicking up and RPGs flying over your head. And I was like, really? I was just like, yeah, I just fucking was running. Like, I don't know, And so, but yeah, anyway, so yeah, I think going down for that journey and for other guys, other not Silver Star recipients, but guys that have been through, their deployments. I mean, it's this, I think some people, it's like you move on from it, but it stays with you. And I think that's something that a lot of people now, I think in the GWAT generation, are starting to get. Because, you know, sometimes you walk away like, yeah, you know, I did it, I was young. You just kind of got to, it's like, you don't forget about it, man. Like, you don't.
Yeah.
That'll be with you to the day you die. My grandpa, the only thing he remembered when he got Parkinson's was his Marine Corps. Like, that's it. That's, you know, the only thing he was a quiet guy, and the only thing he would ever talk to us, it would only talk to like two of his grandkids, and that was me and Tony, was his time in Korea or his just time in the Marine Corps. And they were very proud of it, you know. And I know that's the last thing we're gonna remember when we die, you know, like that will be what we remember. That'll be, you know, it's significant. It's a significant part of your life, and that's okay to accept. And we still got to build upon that. But that will be a big building block, and it'll always stay with you, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. I think that we've all accepted that because, you know, sometimes people want to play it off and they're like, well, you know, we did all that. And I'm like, yeah, but you've built companies around it. And now you're telling other veterans to not like you know, like you harp on that every day. It's all you do. You know, I've seen that weirdness in the community where when someone else is like, you know, I'm going to start a brand, it was kind of like, and then they're just like, oh, well, that's already been done. It's like, don't do that. But it's like, you're doing that right now. You know, I would in that Brovet space.
Don't discount that other effort because they might see something that you don't, you know, or they might fill that space where you don't have something in yet. Or even if you are, you know what, they might, honest to God, they might just have more drive than you and they might be better, you know. And it's, are you going to take that initiative to be like, hey, here's this other guy, like, are we starting to slack? Are we not pushing ourselves? You know, where's it at? Yeah, never discount somebody else.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And you can tell that's just, I think, some insecurities, you know, within the community, you know, because everyone is like, dude, if someone's starting a vet company, go for it. Like, you know, 15, 20 years later, you know, people are like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm like, go for it. There's always new generations of warfighters. There's always new, you know, and like, you know,
well, there's always that guy saying that he's going to go to selection, right? You know, I'm going to go one day, and they just never even do it. They just, it's what they're talking about.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. I think it's just, you know, because you look back at like the rest of the vets before us, it stuck with them. But I mean, like, look at like Korea or Vietnam. Like the Vietnam guys didn't even talk about they were in combat. They never talked about it after they left, you know. And now in the infant, I think in at least our generation, we looked up to those guys, and I don't think they quite knew that there for a while. You know, they're like, hey, you guys are legends among the infantry, and just for them to probably hear that is something like, oh my God, maybe my battle was worth it. Maybe my tour, even though I thought it was fucked up, was worth something to somebody else. It's like, yeah, you guys are legends. Like, you guys, you know, against all odds, you guys did crazier shit than we could ever imagine, you know. So yeah, you know, I think getting stuff out there, you know, I would just say always in the right light, but yeah, it's for me, it's a, you know, emotionally taxing, but at the same time, it's like, it does feel good because I want to highlight what other guys had done and like kind of what overall what happened. And, you know, yeah. So you know, for me, I guess I haven't gone to the route where I'm sure, you know, some other guys have, where it's like, you know, you got to go on, you know, I'm sure the Medal of Honor recipient guys, I talked to Romache, and I think he gets kind of burned out, especially in those early years, you know. He's just, it's the same story over and over and over again, you know, like, and I could see if I had to do it every week, it'd be pretty rough. It'd get pretty burned out, you know. So I, you know, for me, it's been like a year a piece, you know, every time I've gone into detail, I guess you would say, like taking no shit an hour and a half to like, this is the context. Cause you got to know context too. It's not just like, hey, so everything went wrong and there we were stuck in
that's why I was like, I can't touch that instance in this episode, because like this will be the 3 hour long.
Dude, it'll go for 3 hours, man. Like,
and for something like that, I can't do it justice over remote like that. I mean, this remote platform is cool. It opens up stuff like that, but I'm like, that's not what I'm focusing on with this. Is what are people doing now, or what's built up to this point? You know, there are those stories or those podcasts where it is somebody's full story on, hey, this is what I did in the military. And it's like, okay, like, and it's cool to hear those, as well as the storytelling aspect of it. Cause I mean, we just talked about it at length here. You know, these stories are important to be told, but you know, it's, what are you doing now? What's the way forward there? And everything that you're doing too. I mean, it was really like led up to, I know you were saying that you had a smaller show, and then you did some work with, you do another one out there. Now Into the Breach. Yeah, you do 9 Line. And now you're doing the Into the Breach, and you can kind of see the progression along the way. But having that background of your foundation in the Marine Corps, and giving you that drive and that discipline, but also the devil's in the details kind of aspect too, because I've seen it a lot with civilians to where they overlook stuff that we'll pick it out and we'll be like, this is all assed up because of these little details and stuff, and the details matter.
Yep.
And we put it's something that sets the work of a veteran apart. Not all of them, but it's the same thing with people. But I feel like myself anyway, and I see it in some of the stuff that you do where it's infused in there, and it's really it's something that's given you a foundation that can be used for success overall.
Yeah. And here's the thing too, a thing that I shouldn't say cashing on, but the thing that really helped me, I mean, when you set your baseline to such a high threshold of misery and pain, and I'm not talking about like just the Silver Star battle by any means, it's my first deployment. It's the psychological. It's like you were there. You know what it's like to patrol in 100+ degree heat. You know what it's like not to shower for months. You know that no matter what happens, the mission goes. So your stuff better be wired tight. Your mags better be filled. Your gun better be clean and lubed. It's like I said, the devil's in the details. But so a lot of that is translated. Actually, so much of it has translated, that, hey, this isn't as bad as it used to be, one, in the civilian sector, but I'm willing to go the extra mile, the extra task. And it does translate greatly to when you are tired and you have to keep working. You've been up for 24, 48 hours. Like when we, and then my most recent one was Ukraine. We traveled for 24 to 36 hours. We had to kind of sleep in a car for a 7.5 ride into Kyiv. Didn't happen. For some reason, I just couldn't sleep, probably the jet lag. And we get into our Airbnb at 7:30 a.m. and we gotta go at 9 a.m. And I gotta be in front of the camera, and every camera equipment's gotta be prepped, ready to go, ready to rock and roll, subject matter, all that stuff within an hour and a half. So it's like, actually, I take it back. I think we got in at like maybe 5 or 6 a.m. So everyone else that's with me, the two, can go sleep. Not me, because I'm the writer, director, producer, and creator of the series. So what do you got to do? You can't just be like, hey man, let's push it off a day. Let's just like ease into this. Like, no, you gotta make sure everything's going. And then one of the episodes I'm fighting it. I am fighting how tired I am, trying to ask the right questions. Not only that, I have to make sure the shots look good, make sure in my head I know what shots we have to tell the story. After we talk about it, make sure we got the B-roll correct, make sure we got the audio correct, make sure at the time I'm getting the correct audio, like 5-6 different things at one time that are happening. But that comes with the PCCs, PCIs, making sure all your gear is pre-checked and ready to go. So when it's time to go. And again, another incident of that is that when we managed to record 3 of the 5 ballistic missiles getting intercepted over Kyiv above us. I had a camera that was prepped. I had it. She was good to go. All you had to do is click it on, and Sony's fire up pretty quick, ran right outside, press record. And as soon as it picked up recording, got it framed. It's like, so you're thinking more than just the event. You're thinking of how it looks. And then when we got into Izium, we're sleeping in this 1950s Soviet era apartment that's disgusting, and I have to dump footage for the day. I'm up till 2-3 a.m. because I got to dump footage. Got to make sure those cards are good. You got to make sure the batteries are right. Got to make sure you're double backing up on the hard drive. Most of the time you'd be like, oh, well, we can leave it. We do in the morning. Oh, no, you're not. You gotta make sure when you get prepped, you're ready to go, and I'm the one that has to do that, especially when you're one-man banding it out there. I don't have a PA to do that for me while we're on the move. And those are very small examples of what you got to do. Carrying heavy equipment, like film school, man. It would take me an hour and a half to lug multiple lights and camera equipment from our rental department at film school. It'd take me an hour and a half, 2 hours to load up my truck solo. But I was willing to go through that amount of hard work so I can then take another hour to unload at my parents' house and then start lighting things the way I thought I needed to light, because I needed the reps. And if I want to work with light, so it's like, you got to put in that extra time, and that pain threshold, that mental threshold says, hey, let's go to bed. No, fuck that. We got to go. Sometimes just an extra 10 minutes. It's not, it's like, it's just not hanging it up when things get hard. It's not hanging up when you're tired. You know what? I'm going to spend an extra hour and a half making sure everything is ready to go. I'm going to make sure that this is good. I'm going to put the extra effort in today to make sure that things are good 2 weeks from now, and that as veterans, even if it's just boot camp, that stays with you if you utilize it correctly. I mean, I think that's why a lot of people say, hey, veteran success, and because how hard things can be. What sleep deprivation is. How far you can push your body physically and emotionally. And that's just from like a standard. That's just like baseline veterans. Now let alone like guys like us that spend a lot of time in combat. Like then there's another threshold that excelled and have gone to either selections or have gone to for myself scout snipers and all these other things that you are now pushing the envelope physically, emotionally, mentally on top of that. And you really got to know, you got to be smart about how you plan everything. And and then that does translate over, as you get out and you're like, all right, man, like you need to have to wake up at 5:30 in the morning, and also too, you're doing it solo. It's integrity. It's doing the right thing when no one's looking. Sometimes doing the hard things when no one's looking. And guess what? Who cares? No one's going to give a fuck but you, because it matters to you. Or, guess what? You waking up working really hard today, no one cares on Instagram, like it's not going to be posted out there that you rocked it, but you do that for a year in a row, you're going to see the results, whether people see it or not. You're going to be successful in that, and whatever, task or goal that you're trying to do. And so, I think that's why, like I said, when it comes to being a veteran or the things that we went through and translating that into the workforce, in any capacity, obviously it's very helpful. There is a baseline, and also confidence too. It's like, if you're fortunate enough to be like, man, I did some wild stuff out there. It might be simple at the time, but then you look back, it's like, yeah, you're returning fire while, you're under fire, or you're a radio operator. It's like being able to know how to do 9 lines under fire, under pressure to make sure other people get out alive. It's a big deal. You're not just holding security, hoping you get a shot off at the enemy. It's like there's a task to do. So yeah, I mean, that stuff definitely translates over. And,
Did you see film school? Like, was that kind of something that had always been like a passion of yours? And
oh yeah. Yeah.
okay,
So
so and you just naturally moved from the Marine Corps. Like you were like, hey, I'm going to use my GI Bill. I mean, I know you did the contracting gig for a little while.
Yeah. Yep. So I wanted to be a film director since I was 13. So I was a nerd, or I say a nerd through high school. I was like, some people were like a weird anomaly. I was a high school, I was the captain of the high school football team, captain of the high school wrestling team, but also a nerd. I loved films. I loved movies. I had to work hard at kind of being smart at my grades. So I was always working hard from very young age with wrestling. Taught me a lot of stuff with goal setting. And so that really gave me a great baseline as a young adult. And then, but yeah, since I was 13, I wanted to be a film director. So I'd build computers, back in, this is the early 2000s, 2001 to 2005, and I'm like capturing stuff on Firewire, high digital, watching movies, DVD commentaries. Oh, I'm like immersed. And, but I also wanted to be a warrior. I wanted to be a part of the warrior class, watching films, but also my grandparents were World War II in Korea, Marines in both those wars. So, when 9/11 happened, it didn't really affect me as much, because I thought the war was going to be over by that point. Yeah. Iraq kicked off, and then you're like, okay, that's the war that I'm probably going to be in. And we visited USC. I wasn't a fan. I didn't like it. I was like, it's kind of a waste of money. And then my dad's like, and I was basically going to join the Marine Corps. I was at this point, this is between my senior year, and I was like, because it's like, when am I going to go to war? My dad's like, oh yeah, you could become an officer, and I'm like, yeah, the war will be over by then. But lo and behold, it wouldn't have. But you're rolling the dice, and I was like, I don't want to roll the dice. I know if I go now, I have the opportunity to prove myself in combat. I can stand shoulder to shoulder, hopefully, with the generations that came before me, and that meant a lot. And so I was like, I want to be a part of the warrior class. I want to be a part of that, and so I went. So I joined, did my 4 years. That's a whirlwind of a story. But yeah, 3 deployments. Purple Heart, Silver Star, Scout Sniper, 2 tours Iraq, Afghanistan, all that stuff. And then I got out, knowing I needed to decompress, knowing I needed some time. And so I was like, I'll go. And I want to keep going back to combat, but I was like, I'm done with active duty.
That is a lot in 4 years too. Like, I mean, people don't understand to where, especially Marine Corps, because sometimes there are serving in the time of war, and they'd never make it out of fleet, and it's uh, crazy.
I literally was like, okay, I'm going to go make, because I ran into contractors and special operations, all that kind of stuff. And like, so I knew about the Guard, I knew about all these other options, and especially contracting. I was like, awesome. So I was like, I'm just gonna get out. I'm gonna decompress. I'm gonna travel, and I'm gonna make money. But I'm also gonna still be a part of the mission by becoming WIPS or CIA static. Eventually, what I ended up doing.
Wait, when was that?
That was 2010 to 2000. Well, so my first contract was 2010. I was a metal
They
detector.
still had a lot going on back then.
Yeah. I went back to in February to May of 2010 as a metal detector field service rep, which was actually an amazing mission. It wasn't kinetic or crazy. Well, actually, it was kinetic. I should say that. But I wasn't like holding a gun or anything. We were getting fucking rocketed I went to 13 different FOBs teaching NATO ISAF forces. And they, I was trying to get pulled out on mission, and they wouldn't let me, and the guys, guys were there. They're like, oh, dude, we'll give you a gun. Just get your plate carrier. Like, and I was like, yeah, because I need to see if this thing works out in the field. Like, just totally wanted to get into a firefight. And like, they're like, and one guy goes, hey, man, we talked to our platoon. Like, you can come with us if you can just clear it with your, and I talk like, hey, I need to go out on mission. They're like, fuck you. You're not leaving that FOB. Like, and so,
because now you're a liability instead of an asset.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. To the platoon, I was an asset, but to the company, I was a liability.
What I mean, to the company, like you're now on their books, and if they lose you, that does not look good for them.
Yeah, exactly. So I made a bunch. I shouldn't say a bunch of money, but I made great money every month, probably 10,000 plus a month. And to decompress and kind of transition to civilian life, and then I ended up getting on CIA static. And then waited for a little bit on that because we had a bunch of issues with our visas, and managed to get on the black site, managed to do that for a rotation. And I was like, cool. And that was 2011. And then they shut the site down, and I was like, all right, well, they're like, hey, you can go to the Cobra side, which is essentially the same thing. I was on Condor contract, which is the CIA side, and the Cobra was kind of CIA client, but there was a lot more sites.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, WIPS is paying $100 more a day. I was like, well, I'll give that a shot. I'll go to Department of State and WIPS mobile protection. So I ended up going that way as a DDM / WIPS PSS, they called them.
Yeah.
And I did that for trained up, did that, and then did that for a year. And then I finished up in 2013. And then at the same time, get my bachelor's degree online, finished my bachelor's. And then I went into film school in summer of 2014. So that, I was always going to get there. I was like, film, that's where I want to go. It's always been in my mind. And it was amazing and surreal, actually, to actually like step into film school, even though it was like a community college film class. It was amazing. It was best 2 years ever. It was so good. It actually slowed down time a little bit for me. I could enjoy it. I knew that, hey, once this is over, then I have to like kick off my career. So it was a nice transition period of like, just relax for 2 years, even after the 3 years of contracting. Like, you got money saved up, go party, learn the craft that you love, that thank God I loved. Because I was actually kind of scared when the first time I went into video production, because I was like, am I even good at this? Like, I've been building this up in my head like I'm some fucking, auteur, and I don't even know if I'm good at this. And so
well, how did you mesh too with like, just because of, I know a lot of times there's, at least in my experience anyway, the college that I went to right away, there's the Military and Veterans Center. That was in one of the like little basement areas and stuff, and guys would filter in and out because there was resources and stuff there. But I know that they sort of segregated themselves from the rest of campus. And I was on that mindset of like, hey, you're going back to the workforce to go work with people. Like, get out there, go do stuff on campus, or like talk to people, reintegrate. Like, how did that go for you after all of this happening?
Oh, it was a blast, man. I consider myself fortunate.
Didn't phase you at all, huh?
Yeah, no, I was, well, and like I said, I think, I consider myself fortunate on how I handled everything emotionally. Over, after my first deployment, I was all fucked up, but then it was like, okay, I need to move on to compartmentalize, but also like, all right, I need to go do the next best thing. I need to take more control over my situation, but also be part of the best. So I was like, fortunately made Scout Snipers. You start, gaining more control over your fate as you climb the ladder, of like operations and combat. Infantry private, you have no control, and good luck.
Yep.
Squad leader, team leader, squad leader, whatever. But for, it's like, or if you go like, so like Army, it's like you guys, team leader, squad, hey, SF or Delta or Ranger, like you start being able to take more control as you kind of up the ladder in whatever unit you go to, so for me, it was like kind of a progression. And then that third deployment was like I had control over my own fate. So I think psychologically, I walked away a bit more confident. I walked away, especially after the battle, after everything I had done on other previous firefights and the mission that I did. I knew, I knew I had accomplished a lot, and so I can walk away with my head held high. Even though it was weird when I did get out, it was kind of like, yeah, man, like no one knows what you did, so like in your, it's like, it's crazy, it's like, I've gotten shot, blown up. I've been through 3 years of 3 deployments in 4 years. And you just like, and then one day it's over. They hand you a piece of paper and a plane ticket and, and they're like, thanks, go home.
Yeah. Yours was a very abrupt end. Like it was just so packed in, and then thank you for your service and have a nice day, Marine. And wait, what?
It was so weird. I was like, I need to get back on the horse. I need to, I was a little, it was a little, I would say rough, but you can tell like, cause I wanted to keep doing stuff. And like, I was only home for like 2 months and I was starting to lose it. Like, I was like, I need to get back into this. I need to get back to Afghanistan. And I did. Within 3 months, I was back in Afghanistan. So, but that did help me. I did decompress along the way. The money helps. The experiences help. It's like you're slowly like weaning your way off. And then finally, at the end, I was like, dude, I need to like move on with life, or not move on with life. Like, I'm always going to be a part of this. We'll figure that part out, but I need to like move on, like, and go into film, and like, cause you need to start the career at some point.
Yeah.
And, so I did that. And, yeah, I mean, so the 2 years I had already like traveled the world. I had a few girlfriends, you kind of start handling that maturity a bit more. Setting the goals of like what's next, so yeah, entering film school, man, it was a blast because I had a bunch of money saved up. I had actually just been awarded the Silver Star, so you kind of like, I was in film school and people could Google me and they're like, what the fuck, like, and so like this guy sitting next to me like cracking jokes, having a coffee, just be like, hey, what's up, guys, like, and they'll like look me up and they're like, what the hell, and the professors were great, and it was very down and dirty, but it was a great technical film college where I got an associate's in cinematography. And so we learned how to create movies, not just like the theory, but how do you light, how do you construct, how do you, whatever, everything you need to know about cameras and lighting and editing and writing, screenwriting. I love screenwriting, I don't do it as often, but I do love it. So it was awesome. It was great. And it was just 2 years of like relaxation. Like, you got the money in the bank, you're doing what you love. I was working out like crazy. I was traveling when I could, through on breaks. So yeah, so it's not like like I know some people like, I'm going nuts. And, like I'm always been very, I've always been able to process things well. Luckily, even my wife says that. She's like, I thought you'd be all fucked up, like she knows my story. And she's like, when I met you, you were very like, you're happy go lucky. And I was like, well, it's my personality. It's not, I still bury shit, but I think I might compartmentalize a little bit better. I've always set goals and to be like, hey, let's, I'm always going to be somewhat a part of something, so right now, like I'm trying to work with counter human trafficking, when Ukraine kicked off, I went to go help. Hey, we need to evacuate civilians in some aspects, or, we actually helped coordinate the evacuation of orphans. Afghan evac was like, hey, we need to save our dudes. I mean, I almost got on a plane to Tajikistan. Like, we were trying. So, I mean, I think that kind of like, I was missing something because I wasn't a part of the mission anymore.
Yeah.
Even though things were slowing down, that Ukraine really kind of kicked things off in I think a lot of veterans, where it was like some went to go fight and then some are volunteering to help. And then it's also now we found new missions trying to help people in very, crazy, austere environments, extreme environments to, I guess you would scratch that itch, but, try to make a difference. But yeah, I mean, through, the transitioning period, it always sticks with you, but I feel like I was pretty fortunate mentally. And I think because I had that not slow decompression, but it wasn't just a like, hey, go to college, forget about everything you did for the next 4 years, and now you have to deal with these fucking retards at college. I went in, I did the college experience of partying without going to college. So like my buddies, we were partying so much, they did their 5th year, and came in with, from that summer, I always say 2010, the summer of 2010 psychologically for me was great. That was my transition back to being a civilian of who I wanted to be. And also doing the things that I told myself I would do if I made it out alive. And so I did that. And so, I went and, I was dating, and I would go, and my buddies would be broke, and I'd be like, I don't care. We're going to the bar. We're going to make memories, even if it was just the bar. So I'd buy everyone's drinks, like, and constantly over and over, went to go do stupid stuff, went to Wisconsin Dells, like just doing the things that everyone kind of takes for granted when you're not in the situations that we have been in, of like, hopefully someday I'll wake up next to a pretty girl. Maybe hopefully I'll take, I can take my mom and dad out for dinner, or when I get home, I'm going to buy my buddies, drinks, and I don't care about the price. I'll throw the money away. It doesn't matter, because you're making memories opposed to like, material things. And, so that for me was pretty big, that, that 2010 summer. So, I got my first like super hard, official girlfriend, I guess you would say. And it was like, she was a party, we were partying. And so it was just fun. It was a blast. Like, so I spent that whole, like, essentially that school year with her, waiting to go on the CIA contract, just partying. Like, I was just like waiting on my orders to take off. And it was a great time. It was a great decompression. I didn't need to go to college for 4 years to party and get I knew that too. Like, there was a point where I was getting stir crazy. I was like, if, for me, I was like, if I do 4 years of this, I'm going to lose my mind. Like 6 months is great, but I'm not accomplishing anything here for me. I mean, obviously, getting a bachelor's, that's great. But for me, it was, no accomplishment for me. So I was like, this party and drinking is a blast, but I'm not going to do this for 4 years straight. I need to go back and do something significant, i.e. go on the CIA static contract, whips protection, mobile, all that kind of stuff. And then that helped my transition a lot psychologically. And then, visiting my parents, my, just being able to do the stuff that you said you would do after going into war. You make a goal list, and hopefully you can check those off after you make it home alive. And, being able to do that. And, I think I've been very fortunate in that aspect, psychologically, because you have it, you have friends, and we all have friends that just didn't adapt well. We're still 15, 20 years on, and they still haven't adapted well, I think psychology plays a lot more into that factor, over the years. I think some people just handle things better than others. Some people are just more emotional than others. So sometimes I think PTSD amplifies those emotions. So if you're already kind of like emotionally not unhinged, but you're already kind of like on edge or whatever, and you're like, and you do great in combat, but you come home, like, you're probably not going to handle it well. Like, you're always, you always were going to fly off the handle, but now you're a combat vet. Now you're really going to like amplify, not saying that's true for everybody.
There actually is. There's something having to do with, what was the specific one? I was looking into something like what would cause somebody to go bipolar, from these different situations. And they're saying situations of high stress and what can actually trigger someone's ability to kind of cross that threshold. It also almost made me think of, like, is bipolar an actual disorder, or is it just a way of how that particular segment is processing things? And that's a whole nother ball of wax that I've talked with psychologists about, and XYZ. I mean, there's a whole, and that's something that's still evolving as well, that whole field, and you had said something before too. Have you ever had like a psychedelic experience have you ever done any of those?
No, I haven't.
It was the timeline comment that you said before, to where you're like, in another timeline somewhere, I didn't make it. And I know.
Yeah. And I mean more of like, I think you think about that more stuff, maybe, like, well, what if I decided to go to film school? Like, what if in another life, no,
it's not crazy. It's not crazy
it's just like a thought. But like, for me though, it's like a real thing. Like, dude, like, it was lights out and lights came back on, and obviously I know what happened. I didn't actually die and come back to life. My brain had thought I had, and so, it's just like in those moments, and like, I've almost gotten shot by snipers before that, like, so the fate in the game of inches and centimeters, I still got hit near my jugular and femoral. Like even, okay, so if I did walk away from that, there's a timeline I might have bled out. I might have kept fighting. Maybe I bled out,
Yep.
so there's like, when people don't come home, you're kind of like, shit, man. Like, but then, everybody thinks is like, hey man, it should have been me opposed to them. That's a very common thought I had with friends that have gotten killed in that era. Like would have been absolutely happy to take their place. They had families to go home to. I was just a single guy. Who gives a fuck about me?
Yep.
Obviously I have a family, but back then that's the sacrifice you're willing to make. And that's the mentality that you need to be in. It's like, no, I'll take his spot. Like, take me, so I think that's where I think it said the emotion of it, like Vose was killed. Like, why him? Why not me? Like he had a family to go home to. He had daughters, why me? Why, take me instead of him, so it's, you think about that a bit more, especially after the fact,
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just saying, like, just in generalities, but yeah, the psychedelics, I like to be in control, and I've been fortunate enough where I might have, I don't think I have any kind of signs of TBI or because Amanda asked me about that. She's like, I was like, honestly, I wasn't around a lot of explosives, and typically, or being rocked. I've never been like super rocked. And I was like, I know the reason why that's prominent in SEALs and SF and whatever, because they were using door charges left and right. That's why they have that. Yeah, it's not
there's a lot.
And Gustav, my buddy, has dried brain clots because he used 6 AT4s in 1 hour.
I've done the AT4 range too, where they put me as a trainer, and I was like, man, how many of these do I actually want to send off? And I think it was the second one that the second guy that came up, it was actually a dud. So they put it on the range, and we had to wait for EOD, and I didn't have to do any more for that day. So I mean, maybe I dodged a TBI. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is, and now we learn more about it. And and my brother definitely does, but he was a combat engineer. So he's doing a high, especially when they're breaching down in 08 in Afghanistan, they were doing MIGLICs, so I mean, so I think there is some definite stuff with the TBI, and I know guys that have done psychedelics and it absolutely helps them, like the ayahuasca trips. I think that's for some very extreme cases. I wouldn't, I think it's great they're advocating, but I wouldn't be throwing that shit around though either, because psychedelics messing with your brain chemistry, because that's what it does. Yeah. And if you don't need it, then don't do it. And there's other horror stories out there of non-vets doing it, and it ruins their life because it's not meant for suburban house moms. It's meant for people with extreme rewired brain, traumatic brain injury, or TBI, from what I've understood. Even I've done edibles, that's the closest I've ever gotten to anything like that. And sometimes it helps. Sometimes it's throwing me into a panic attack. And sometimes you go into weird thoughts that I don't want to be thinking. And that's because of the edibles. So I think every veteran has to be aware of their body. I've been running.
Everybody's different too.
Yeah, everyone's different. Like, everyone takes, family members take THC all day long, and they're just like, man, it's great. It's like having a drink, they're like, oh, and I guess I've just, maybe it doesn't take well with me. I don't like where my thought process goes. Like, it's just weird stuff. It's not like I'm like, man, and there was one time it did work for me that was like, man, this is relaxing. I slept great. It did lower my tension. So I'm trying to I haven't done it since the last time threw me. I misread the label, took way too much, and it threw me into a panic attack. So it was kind of my fault. But it's like something you don't want to overdo, or say you do get a weird batch, and now suddenly you're just like in this weird, if you're messing with your brain chemistry, like that's a different thing. You know what I mean? Like, and so I think it's good for some people. I think the very small doses of THC is very good. I think for guys, I'm probably going to try to get back into it again, but I don't do it often. And I think it's one of those like cleansing palate things, like, and before you do that, you should be working out. Like that's, I always think number one, like, before you start taking edibles or think you need to do something, go hit the fucking gym and see how far you can run on that treadmill. Probably not very far, and it probably sucks ass because you think you're in better shape than you are, and you're not. But I think working yourself back into that, because I run even in my, I'm not in the greatest of shapes of all time, but like even at the crappiest moments of me running, I feel great after because of that endorphin high.
That's not even accounting for the fact that once you start exercising regularly, you start eating better and everything, and that all that stuff starts
Yeah.
almost like a force multiplier. It just builds on everything.
And by the way, like, and invest into your health. Like, I think some people are like, well, there's this THC in edibles. I'm like, yeah, you're replacing alcohol for another drug. So now they may not be this.
California sober.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like and by the way, yeah, they are different. There's different compounds. By all means, I know people might lose their minds, but you're still replacing one thing for the other. And by the way, I used to be able to fall asleep, was phenomenal with whiskey. I forgot once I had my panic attack in 2019, like most alcohols will trigger something. I don't know if it's just the compounds or how it works with my blood pressure now, but it totally like amplifies. I get terrible sleep. Maybe it's just because I'm older, but but regardless, I don't drink nearly as much. I built a bar in my basement. I drink like once a week. I have like 2 beers, but I do love my whiskeys when I can, and in very small amounts. But I miss the days where I could have 2 solid stiff whiskeys, go to bed, and have amazing dreams and wake up. Like I miss those days. But if you're doing THC or doing stuff, you're swapping one for the other. So, or at least be careful with that. My thing is,
I tell guys all the time because I see it. Like you can see if you don't keep track of it or you're not watching it, you see a productivity drop. And I mean, I have seen people from the THC end go from, man, things are going great, to, I mean, they're calm, they're chill, but they're not doing anything.
now you're not
It's
driven.
like, dude, like, where's it? Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, at least like, if you know that about it too, like, all right, so set yourself a backstop and be like, hey, this is what I can accomplish in a day. Like, keep track of that and then be like, am I still doing the same stuff? Like, do I have to just motivate myself harder, or am I maybe putting stuff into the vices too much?
Yeah.
So you're not wrong.
And by the way, when that did, I felt calmer. My edge was gone. My hypertension or tension, I guess you'd say. I would say it's not diagnosed hypertension, but the tension was gone. It was really weird because I was like, and it wasn't bad weird either. I was like, is this what people typically feel like? Or maybe this is what it was like before because my brain's always going.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that very much. I was like, now is my edge gone? Is my creativity gone? Not saying the creativity, but like that edge that I guess my tension gives me, it makes me like, I don't mind that. I don't, you know what? Be aware of what your surroundings are doing, or, hey, we need to keep working, buddy. You suck. Keep working. Like, it's okay to have that tension in your head, like, or whatever. So I think maybe a palate cleanser. Like I did like it though, because it did calm my blood pressure down. Like my heart rate dropped. It was great. Like for about 2 weeks, I was like, but then again though, for me, it's like awesome. I'm working out and I feel great on top of it. I just don't do it and then walk away. But dude, I think one of the big things for me recently is like getting in my health fitness back. I've always been doing it, but like really now honing it in. But like, dude, eating clean, like I do Factor meals. Is not a plug for Factor, but anything along those lines of eating clean, it's amazing. I've gone to Europe multiple times. You always feel better. I went to Ukraine and ate better over there, and I felt so good because the food was clean. And not to go on a RFK rant or anything here, but the Factor, like, just one meal a day, which I use, my wife does, because I was like, you know what, I need to get my diet correct because I'm almost taking like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And it's not because it's bad. It's just like my wife will make something or whatever. It's like I need to really hone it in. So I did that for the last like few months, or for actually a lot more, the last like month and a half, 2 months with the Factor meals. And dude, I felt amazing. It feels so good. You feel cleaner. You feel leaner. I have one meal a day. That's at dinner. That's where I prefer. My wife does it at lunch. And then for lunch, I make like chicken, rice, whatever. But then the Factor meal is like, it's just clean. You're eating clean throughout the day. And it's like, dude, I feel so much better. And I think that's a process that everyone needs to take. That's like, take the pill. They'll be good. It's like, I honestly take the holistic full body wellness first. Like take 6 months and drop some weight, eat clean. If you're going to invest into a bunch of bullshit, you might as well invest into like pre-prep meals that are clean, that aren't having preservatives, that you're not taking chicken out of a bag, which I still do for my lunches, but that still's got some weird whatever, even the Costco stuff.
There was a year where I did the whole get out of the military, gain a bunch of weight, feel like crap about myself, although I'm getting stuff done, but I'm just like, I'm going in this spiral, and started doing just that, started eating clean, moving, going to the gym, lost 70 pounds in a year, you know, and everything was just so much better. I found that baseline. Like, okay, I found out what is my baseline look like, you know, and the VA doctor even was like, man, what are you doing? And I'm like, honestly, it's because they SSRIs and everything else. And it's like exercise does a better job than any of that crap.
Hmm.
For one, that's proven scientifically. Uh, but doing that, finding that baseline, and then him asking it, and I was like, well, so this is what I'm doing. Here's my meal prep. Here's my, you know, I eat, everything's clean, exercising 4 hard workouts a week, and that's what got it there. And he just kind of looks at me and he's like, man, I wish I could do that. And I'm like, you can, like, you freaking idiot. Like, you can do that. You just don't have the discipline to do it.
I think that's hard for guys because it's tough because they want to get back to their like, you know, if you want to get back to your military in shape, one, good luck, but it's going to take a long time. And I think, you know,
Yeah.
for me, I could always outrun my diet all the way up until my 30s. And then that's when, yeah, exactly, you know, and that's when it, you know, in the last like few years have been really tough, like just ups and downs. I dropped 10 pounds, you gain back 5, you know, and you're back and forth, back and forth. And then it starts wearing on your joints because you know, your mind is trying to go farther than your body can. You know, everyone's like, oh, you can, you know, they're like, your body, you can push yourself hard. I was like, yeah, but I mean, if you've been to some crazy places and you try to push your body 15 years later, you're going to throw up and pass out. Like, it's not going to end well. You know, I'm not running 6-minute miles anymore. So, and so I think that's one of those things where, you know, slowly get the goals, you know, like I've already set goals for myself now, you know, and it's like, it's a lifestyle, healthy, you know, like I came to that fruition and it's fine. I'm a procrastinator, believe it or not. So I'm like, you know, for months, for the last like 5-6 months, I was like, I need to get on Factor. I need to get on Factor. I just need to get this one meal down because I'm getting the other 2 down. It's like that third to finally bring it in. And
Yeah.
it does, you know, because you start seeing that progression, you know, you start seeing you lean up, you start like I had a pinched nerve in my back in the fall and like, it doesn't even, nothing bothers, you know, it's like doing a different type of circuit workout, maybe switch from running to circuit and go back to, or hey, do lift. So just getting that full body in to get, honestly, to, yeah, drop that weight to where you want to get to where you're like, now I'm going to do some crazy shit. Like I want to still do some crazy shit, but I
Yep.
got to drop 25 for sure before I can start getting back because you know it's tough. Guys want to do it, and then they always say don't, you know, work your way up, because if you do what we do and you're like, I'm going to do it next week, dude, you'll quit. You know, like even the hardest minds will be like Delta operator. Well, because you're not 40 pounds later and
Yeah.
13 years younger. You know, so psychologically you just need to start working your way up and just take more time. But yeah, I agree. I think, you know, it's just, and also just it's your life now, you know. For me,
Yeah.
I think that's something that I realized in the last few. I talked with my wife ever since COVID, because I couldn't outrun my diet anymore. We were drinking so much wine. You know, it was before my daughter was born. It's like 4 years ago. You know, and then I'm like up and down, up and down. You know, my weight's always been like that, but now it's like drastic. And I was like, man, I just need to, you know. And now I'm 38, and I'm like, yep, it's you know what, this is now. This is what we're doing. You know, she loves the fact. Like, if that's what we need to put our money into pre-prep, because we have 2 young kids. I got a 4-year-old and you know, almost 4-year-old, almost a 1-year-old. It's like, then that's what we do. You know, fortunately we can do that. But we don't go out as much. We don't buy as many groceries. We, you know, we're trying to, you think about your health a hell of a lot more, because you want to be there in 20, 30, 40 years in better shape than I am now. Like, that's the goal. And then keep it, maintain it. You know,
Yeah.
I've been enough to where I've had to do that, and everyone, yeah, it's a fun challenge when you're younger, but you know, it's once you get back to that point, then maintaining it's, you know, then, you know, you're not, and also we're not going out drinking every night. You're not working out as hard, but you're trying to like when you get in, when you can. And, you know, so yeah, I agree with you. I think that the health fitness before you start doing other stuff, but even when it comes to the THC, or when it does come to, you know, psychedelics, I think it's great for some guys. I think that's a smaller portion than what everybody wants to think that's the new cure. And honestly, I think they're playing with fire. I think it's great. I think those are the very, very extreme cases. Because I don't think there's a lot of veterans that should be going out there and then doing psychedelics down in Mexico. Like, I honestly, I do think it's some very extreme cases with some very extreme TBI. Or if you are getting to some real, real dark places, I can understand that. But there's some other people that have gone down there and it goes horrifically wrong. So I think that's, you know, probably more, you know, unless you really, really need it.
Yeah.
You know, we do scuba, you know, I'm part of Warfighter Scuba Foundation, and that gets you into another mindset because everyone's sober, no one's allowed to drink. You're doing a very physical activity, and we're also getting down to depth under 30 feet. So it is rebuilding stem cells and getting
Oh,
that
wow. Yeah. Yeah.
oxygenated blood going, because we go at pressure when you go to depth. It's a
Yeah.
hyperbaric chamber,
I
essentially.
was
What
just
it's
going to say it's a hyperbaric chamber.
it's a
Yeah.
hyperbaric chamber. So we'll do, you know, and you're spending, it's not just like, oh, 2-3 minutes. We're down at depth for 30, 40. So you do like 40 minutes a week or something. It's like doubles your regenerative stem cells or something like that.
Oh, that's amazing.
And we're doing it like 2 to 4 times a day. So vets are exhausted. They're learning a skill. You're surrounded by guys. You're not drinking. You're still telling war stories, but you're not drinking. You're cleaning your body out, and it's good pressure, like less pressure on the joints for guys that have like lost limbs. So, you know, I wish I could do it all the time, but I live in Minnesota. But I'd get down there enough where, you know, but I understand I got to take care of my body here, but like a body, you know, you just can't be like, well, I can't scuba dive. I guess I'll just drown myself in alcohol. But like, it's one of those things, you find a certain way to help people and help yourself. And, you know, and sometimes other things too, you know, like, but, you know, that's why I particularly love the scuba diving aspect. But you know, you got to approach the whole thing, you know, which is like, if you need to stop drinking for a while, then stop. You know, sometimes I know people that just go months without it. It's a very big trend right now, which I think is good. You know,
Well, that is, if you can take something and put it down, no, you're absolutely like, and that tells you, like, if you're like, oh man, I really like need that hit, or I really need that drink, that's that warning flag saying, hey man, you don't actually need it, and you didn't need it before. Like, why are you craving it now? That thing actually has a hold on you, and it's just a little ding ding. Hey,
Yeah.
wake up call.
Yep, exactly. You know, and like I said, I now I look at booze and I'm like, oh man, I got to get up with my daughter at like 4 a.m. You know, so there's consequences to doing that. So I have definitely, you know, I'm sure once I get a little older, I'm like, all right, I'm going to tie a few more on during the week. But, you know, it does, if you're training or you're working towards a goal, and be like, all right, cool, like start with don't drink during the week, you know, and then just do your few on the weekend, and then like pursue that, you know, make sure you're doing, you know, just as a whole, you know, I think accomplishing goals and setting, I think that's another thing too. And that's not just veterans. I think that's some people in life. Like what's, you know, what is your next goal? What's your next thing? You know, it doesn't have to be climbing Everest, you know, is it, or maybe it is like, maybe I always want to go to Italy. We'll do that next year. You know, sometimes just for people it's travel. I've noticed that a lot. You know, my wife, you know, it's like, hey, let's just try, let's do some of these things that people always talk about, they never do. Like even if just is setting those type of goals, like I'm going to take the family, you know, if like, hey, I'm going to take the family, we're going to go to Ireland or whatever. It's like, dude, that's like it's a big commitment. It's a big goal. It's not physical, but it's something different that you can work towards, and it makes you feel great, and you have memories. You know, physical, like, hey man, like, why don't you, I want to start running 5 miles again. All right, well, work your way back up. Like, you know, maybe I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do the veterans group. I'm going to go hunting with the veterans. Like, let's set that goal. You know, you know, if it's just something different, something that's going to push your boundaries, maybe physical, maybe mental, you know, I'm going to read 5 books this week. Work up to that. You know, sometimes people think they have to do this crazy thing that everyone needs to know about on Instagram. Sometimes it's not just that. Like, I miss reading. It's like I miss cardio. Like, I can do cardio, but man, it's like getting the time to read. That's hard. So, you know, hopefully one of these years I'll get back into reading again. It sounds terrible that I'm saying that, you know, like I'm dumb as a box of rocks, but like, you know, it's like, yeah, man, I used to read all the time. You know, I used to crush books in the Marine Corps on deployments. And then when I was traveling, cause I was in school, and I've read more books than most people have. Like, you know, not bragging by any means, but like I know my peers, I absolutely surpassed them, you know, and I have my books, like I started displaying them. I've held on to them for 15, 20 years, you know, just be like, hey, it's like my DVD collection. These are the books that I've read, you know? And, but it's one of those things though, I think, you know, just setting goals that helps drive people, you know, and especially in today's society, everybody wants to put everything on Instagram. Don't put it on Instagram. Just do it within your family. You know, like your kids won't care what you post on Instagram. They won't. You know, we have a lot of people in the infancy community. Their lives are fucking disasters compared to what they're posting on Instagram. I know that, you know that, and I hope for the best for them.
I was laughing when you were talking before about someone who had the studio and stuff, and I've been to some studios before and seen it, and how they can really make a studio look like home, you know, or some other space, and it's just like, man, half this stuff we're watching out there is not real at all.
Yeah, exactly. Like, look, people come to my studio and they're like, it's in my basement, you know. like, yeah, but it's the angles. It's all about angles, but that's what I think though, it's like, sadly, guys have taken their life and everyone thought they were just riding high with their hot wife and kids. And like at the end of the day, and they were doing great. And sadly they off themselves and, or, they're just not doing well mentally. They're in a rut, or they just like, they're on their 5th divorce, or, but hey, their Instagram account's popping. It's like, that's not how it is, and I think,
it's not real.
yeah, especially when you start having kids, I think you realize it. Like, it's, I was talking with Brian yesterday, a few days ago, and, it's like just taking time with them, and what you do in front of them is going to, what's matter. And I think that does help for guys that have families, but also like, but if it's with your wife, or maybe if it's your friends or something like that, like your community, your bubble that's around you every day, that's what's going to matter. You can shoot for the stars and do some other stuff, but like, dude, Instagram and the influencer stuff, man, it comes and goes,
Yep.
How, not to get into specifics, but, we were talking before the podcast, how many do we know that have gone up in the recent months, and now they're coming hard down.
Well, that's also, I think too, that the foundation, like ultimately the foundation of the correct support system and the guys that stick together, it just wasn't put together correctly. That takes time. And that was actually something that started off with, that was ultimately, and I'm not touting it as this, but like, this was part of the whole thing with my book. And then I think that Andrew actually went further with it though, on how he integrated his platoon in there. Because I have a few of the contacts and stuff where we've kept touch, and I have the call out sheet and stuff. And if anybody ever calls me, I'm like, yeah, or you need to get a hold of who. But like literally those guys, it's almost, man, quarterly they're holding a platoon Zoom call with all the guys and stuff. And I'm like, man, I love what it's done for you guys and brought you guys closer. Like, how do I actually reintegrate that or work that into another project or pass this info along to somebody else to be like, hey, you had those pre-existing support groups from guys you were with. Why did we stop? Why doesn't it continue? Why did we stop after we left service? Does it have to, especially these days with the technology and stuff? What is an hour-long Zoom call that, let's face it, it always ends up being 3 when we get on with any of those guys. But, that's like a Wednesday night or something. And you check in with everybody, and that not only is accountability, but then you're also having guys that are gonna reach out with problems or something and be like, hey, or on the flip side, the celebrations for stuff. Hey, this just happened in my life, guys, and a lot of them do. They'll cheer from there and be like, man, good fucking job, man. I never saw that coming. That's awesome. And so this stuff's already there, but uncovering it and using technology, and it's, I guess you just got to have your heart in the right place when you build something out like that, and be prepared for the long haul.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think that in the early years, Facebook was actually pretty good because you could keep up with guys without having to call them. Throw a comment their way, throw a message, you know what I mean? Like, and I think we're all guilty of it. I think for me, it's like, you just, I think about guys all the time. My wife's like, well, why don't you text them or something? I was like, I should, and then like, I think about them all the time, and I should give them a call, and I don't, but at the same, I think we have the Facebooks, I think did actually help for a while, because you're like, oh shit, I can see what their guys are doing, and so the catching up, could kind of be like, oh, see, oh, that's awesome, but I think as we've just gotten older, maybe it's, for me, it's like just things get so busy, and now I don't even like look at Facebook as much anymore. Or like and I think things have compounded, or we want to see how things are going with other guys, and it does help though. I mean, we got a reunion coming up next year. I know I got to contact my commander about, but I went to the 15-year for my Iraq deployment, and then we should have done a 10-year, or we should probably do a 15-year. That would be this next upcoming year for Afghanistan. But yeah, it's like trying to get those together, or whatever. That is nice to see guys in person, see how they are doing. The guys that do show up, and you just learned that. I didn't realize, I thought one guy had gotten out of the Marine Corps. He actually finished off as like a first sergeant. Like he did, like, oh, I did 20 years. And I was like, dude, I thought you fucking got out like after we got back from our first pump, dude. I didn't even know you were even in. And they ended up, he was like one of my seniors, and I was like, oh shit, you just he's like, yeah, I just retired. I'm like, oh my God, dude, I thought you were I legit thought that you had gotten out, and but yeah, I think it's catching up and guys sharing the stories. And, I think going back to that, guys who do reunions, like the World War II guys are doing a lot. And I think, I think every generation eventually starts getting into that. I think maybe because we're just getting older, but, trying to hold their reunions, I don't say more often, but I think in the latter years, when you start getting a little older, away from it, guys are starting to gravitate more. Maybe they're settled down, or maybe they're having issues, but maybe, it's, things are going so much, a million miles an hour, those first 10 years or 15, 20 years, I mean, I can't believe it's been 20 years, almost 20 years next year. And I still feel like I'm, 22 years old, figuring out, and
It is weird how that works, huh? That
yeah,
transitionary period just.
yeah, exactly. It's like I've done a lot, but at the same point, I'm like, oh my gosh, so yeah, it just feels that way. But no, yeah, I agree. Calling guys up and see how they're doing, and like I said, it's I guess it's also refreshing too. Sometimes it's just like video calls. Sometimes it's just nice doing them in person. Meeting up with 20 guys and just being like, what's going on? What happened here? This, that. What are you catching up? And
I've never regretted it. Anytime I've ever met up with any of the guys, I've never regretted it. You might have that in the back of your head, being like, oh man, I don't know. Sometimes, life is kind of crazy right now, and you're giving the excuses, but then you're like, all right, let's do it. Let's go. And then afterwards, you're like, man, why did I even think that?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that too, like I said, I think it's just, yeah. I've regretted, I didn't regret not going to the 10-year, and then I ended up going to the 15, and I'm like, I'm definitely got to go to the 20. But yeah, I agree with you. It's always better to go. You won't regret it. So, but yeah.
Well, enough looking back. What's going forward for you, man? I mean, do you have Into the Breach? You've done stuff with, documentary, mini documentary or full documentary with Ukraine stuff?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
or a series, like you say. So that was like official with Vet TV. We went into Ukraine and talked with Western forces fighting there, and the Ukrainian forces fighting as well on the ground, and just kind of what life is like. But yeah, that's that. We're looking to do another one of those. So we're trying to find the next story. I'm a freelance, so it's always, I'll get calls for some wild stuff here. Like, we got a documentary we want to make. Like, cool, where's the money? And they're like, oh, well, we'll see. So, it's always like that, which is great. Sometimes people get it off the ground, sometimes they don't. But it's great to be in a point of my career where people start calling me, in the last probably 2-3 years. Like, it's been nice, where it's like, hey, I got a lot of work comes from references. So that's been awesome. So a little last minute stuff, but you end up having great adventures and whatnot. But Into the Breach is great because it gives me one to build something other than I hate to say this, other than a media agency. I'm just you're doing I feel like I'm creating something opposed to like trying to be in a business salesman, if that makes sense. But the Into the Breach is this year's big project. Getting that up and running, and also getting the marketing behind it, and just like everybody else, trying to find building it up. For me, the goal is to be more of a media heavy media, and I don't say media agency, but maybe a media production house a little bit more. So my goal here, either in this year or next year, is to start on my own right now before sponsors. Obviously, everyone's like, oh, well, you gotta. I think put your money where your mouth is and create things that, before people pay you for it. I think people want to see you have a skin in the game. And I think it's frustrating for filmmakers, but sometimes, say most of the time it works, but 50-50 shot it works. Show people what you can do, not tell them what you can do, and then they'll buy what you already have. So, and I think that's really tough for filmmakers. I right away, like, you always do, they say, hey, you freelance, or you do the free projects first, and you do. That's very common. I know there's a big uproar about internships or doing free projects, or free work. I mean, you got to know when to say no, but I did that too. I mean, I did free work. It's some of my best work because you're free to do whatever, or it got me into the door in the next project that people will pay me and whatnot. So, for me, so that's why Into the Breach is, it's like, dude, no one's paying me for this. It's all out of pocket. I fly people out on my own dime. I paid for all the cameras. I pay for all the lights, all the marketing pushes behind it. It's all me, so that, I think for me, it's been a fun challenge. It's been a great challenge, but it's been also nice because you do get feedback. People are really liking it. It's growing. So seeing those milestones get hit, so I'm hoping to hit 10,000 subscribers here on YouTube in the next week. And
Right.
then got some heavy hitters coming on, or heavy hitters, some bigger guests coming on, and then working towards more and more. And then actually, like, some people I want on, but I'm like, I have to strategically kind of like, hey man, it's twice a month. So I'm trying to like get people that are like, hey, we can kind of move the needle a little bit, but then also have my friends on that's like, we can just hang out and bullshit. But yeah, so it's trying to balance that, because you don't want 2 months to go by and 4 episodes just me and my homies just hanging out. Like there's gotta be a little bit of a movement forward. But some people might like that, but I still want to, make sure that we're highlighting some fun stuff. But yeah, but turning more into a media production where you hopefully have some mini docs this year. I always say mini docs because full documentaries are full docs, but having the series, but yeah, you get a nice, intense 10, 12-minute story. I love making those. And so my goal this year is to have either a series 1, 2, or 3, or maybe work on the first one and have that out by fall to kind of push Into the Breach as its own channel into more territory than just podcasting a show. I think podcasting shows are great. Also doing roundtables with veterans. So it's not just always a mini doc. It'll be, my goal is to sit down, like say you guys would actually be a great one. The Argandab River Valley boys, like, hey, we're going to talk 2.5 hours. I'm going to bring in 3 veterans from that deployment, and we're going to just do a roundtable, and I'll moderate, but I want, because individual stories are amazing. That's great. But dude, dynamics of having 3 guys that serve together, and we always do it. And people are like, man, we should record this. I'm like, yeah, we should. And I did do one, but it wasn't around the same deployment. But I want to do something like the Hollywood Hollywood Reporter does, the directors, on actors, and they sit in a round table and they just shoot the shit of how they make films. I want to do that. And like, hey, how do, one will go through your history, but let's go through your deployment. What did you see from this angle? What did you see from that angle? And what was life like? What would you guys do? So getting more into that as well as as projects, but having the channel be, it's veteran focused, but it's not all veterans. I think, we'll definitely be expanding into civilian stories and the other stories in general that are interesting to me, because it's my channel. I can do whatever I want. So
Exactly.
yeah,
I think that I mean, it is the progression. There is like, and they say it like, hey, like stick to this segment and stuff, but unless you go and try it, like you're having these thoughts or like this vision of what you want in the long run for a reason, follow it. You did with the creation of it. I did with the creation of some of the stuff I've done, and it like continues on with some of the other things. Just follow it. Not only is it rewarding, like self-rewarding and stuff. I'm not saying it's really rewarding right away.
Yeah,
Nothing that's worth it ever is.
Yeah. No, I agree.
But you'll get there, and you'll figure it out along the way.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, not to keep on repetition, obviously Joe Rogan's made hundreds of millions of dollars, but also it's the span of guests, it's repetition too, it doesn't change, but that's a different type of show. I love what I do. I love what Into Breach is doing, my show is doing, but I want to do more with it. I just don't want to podcast. I do love it. This obviously it'll be the big backbone of the show for sure. But I do want to tentacle out and touch other areas that then push my filmmaking. And then, just as a channel, like, life, war, film, that's a pretty big expansion on life, but I do want to focus on film because that is my job. Like, I think it's my passion. It's my work. It's my life. We talk a lot veteran heavy stuff, but it is, film is what I live for. That's what I do. So any type of, but it's been great though to work a lot. Obviously a lot of my clients are veteran based and the stories are veteran based and what they accomplish is veteran based. So, that's worked out very well. But if, I'm trying to be like, hey man, this is how you make a film that has nothing to do with veterans, but we're just making a film. To me, I want not only just to have the veterans come in, but also film nerds come in and be like, oh yeah, man, like, what do you think of, because a lot of people are like, what's Black Hawk Down? What's your take on that? It's like, all right, well, warfare, how's that going? We talked about before, not only are we watching these films and critiquing them, some of us are trying to get our own films off the ground, or our own stories off the ground in that process. And that's, I know.
And why would you keyhole yourself from someone that's all they've ever seen, or like that's the only space that they're really involved in? It's like, hey, you got to expand on that. And there's so many people out there that are they're willing to help, or willing to. I really do think that these days, the amount of knowledge that's out there that you can just research, and not all of it is legit, but there's a lot of stuff out there to where I remember in the 90s, they used to have to buy these business tapes and stuff, and now all
Yeah.
this stuff is just all out there, and
All out
it's
there.
crazy to me to think that way.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing too is, like I said, from the filmmaking aspect of this, and we kind of talked too, expanding the network, expanding the reach, and I think I was joking with some other guys about it in the space, for filmmaking space. It's frustrating. You don't have to do it, but it's a running joke in our industry. Is like, oh, this is the year I have to become a content creator or a social media influencer, and here I am starting a podcast, but I've been wanting to do for years, and it feels like I'm playing right into that joke. Like, well, I guess I better start a podcast, like to get out there. But it's ironically, but we joke about that, and it is frustrating because you do see content creators and you're like, but what have you made? Like we've seen a lot of like, like what have you made? Like where's your client? Awesome. If you're just making money off content, like, dude, that's great. But like, that's not, if I'm a great director or cinematographer, I shouldn't have to have a social media influence of like 100,000, or a YouTube channel. That's, and so I think it's still one of those things that build up in filmmakers' mind, not just veterans, but filmmakers' heads. They're like, oh my God, now I gotta vlog my life, and now I gotta be a YouTuber. And now you don't have to do that.
No.
And for me, the Into the Breach outlet, one, I wanted to do a podcast regardless of whether I'm a filmmaker or not. But two, it does give me an avenue and an excuse to then now push myself and be like, you know what? I can make mini docs. It's out of my pocket. I do not expect anybody to pay me for this, but I can say this is for the channel. And it's not just a channel based on mini docs. It's like, love this podcast, and we can now once a month or every 2 months or so, we'll see a mini doc of a foundation I want to highlight and I want to create something for. So I do sometimes think like some guys, like it does help with our network building. So it's like, oh, somebody's on that. Oh shit. There's they eyes mic it on, but don't do it because, I'm not doing this so I can network. I'm doing it because I love what I do. And it does give me another avenue of not only can I do this and love doing it and create and improve myself, but maybe, just maybe someone will see it and they'll be like, hey, let's start a conversation, and so even my social media, like even with on my Instagram, I do post work on Instagram, and people will check that, which is great. A little annoying, but they'll check it and they'll be like, hey, you do great work. Can we do some? So at least it gives credentials, but you got to build up to that. I think I get a little, feel like they're behind the 8 ball because they don't have a YouTube channel, or because they don't have a podcast channel, or because their social media is only 1,000. It's like, dude, that's okay. Like, don't worry about it. Like this happens to work out for this. But if I wasn't a filmmaker or whatever, like I'd still be making Into the Breach. It's like, cause I want to, but if I can make the excuse for myself to be like, oh yeah, I can kind of web this out, into what I do as a skill, because I'm media. That's what I do. It does help, but I don't expect other people to do it, and you shouldn't be, perturbed not to, continue your skill set or whatever you do, or filmmakers in general. Like, dude, Roger Deakins doesn't have a YouTube channel. He's one of the best cinematographers living. Like these guys don't have, and that's okay. That's great. They shouldn't, because they do amazing work. You still have to get out there. You still have to do the work. You still have to network with or without social media. You still got to make the connections. You still got to work your ass off. No matter what, it's not an easy gig. I mean, filmmaking or what I say is a blanket filmmaking, but probably media content creation or media, the media production, like, media based projects are not easy getting into this world. Like, every film school you go to or whatever, or media school, it's going to be like maybe 2 people out of the whole class will make a living, maybe 3 or 4, and then one's really going to succeed, who knows, but it ain't the whole class. It's not a class of accountants or nurses, that's not 100% success rate or 98% where they go off and they find a job and everything's hunky-dory. Like everyone else moves on to something else, with the exception of the people who are really going to work hard and be passionate. You can be passionate, but if you're not working hard, not getting after it, it's not going to work out.
They go hand in hand.
Yeah,
they
do. They go hand in hand. You got to put the work in. And that's life, it just, I mean, it is what it is.
No, it is.
But
yeah. That was business school for me. There was, I told them, I was like, there's a lot of smart people in this room, but I know, I can tell you definitively, I will outwork any single one of you, and that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. But I mean, it did. It ended up working out, for the better on that end. But where can people find you out there?
Oh man. So right now, go to Into the Breach show on YouTube. Definitely go check that out for, to shows, subscribe. Instagram is Into the Breach Show, at Into the Breach Show. Just hit 1,000 followers, so pretty happy about that. You can check me out. My official work/personal page is at ethan.nagel.films. At ethan.nagel.films on Instagram. That's so you can see some of my work there. Also crossover with Into the Breach with clips, but you can also check out some of the work I do, some personal photography and whatnot. And then go to see my reel officially, go to www.ethannagelfilms.com. And then if you want to hire me, which would be amazing, put out my work card there. You go ahead. I have links. You can email me at ethan@ethannagelfilms.com. So everything's ethannagelfilms.com. So ethan@ethannagelfilms.com. That'll be like the actual email. Come reach out to me or go check out the channels and leave a like, subscribe, all that
That's
stuff.
how you know it's legit. It's got the .com.
It's got the .com. Yeah. Oh, Spotify. Check out Spotify or Apple Podcasts. On Rumble as well. You got like 2 followers on that. But
Well, I mean, that's the beginning of all this stuff anyway. I mean, I get it. You put the RSS feed out and you go from there, kind of thing. And it is kind of strange on some of the meta platforms. On things have just kicked back.
Yeah,
it's strange. It is weird. It's weird how all that works. But I'll make sure that everything gets into the description links as well, so that people can just click on this stuff and find it pretty easy that way.
Go check out Vet TV and Vet Actual. So go subscribe. I think it's like $4.99 a month or something like that. Go check out the series. Got 2-3 episodes. Very proud of that. So that was the series I created for them, and hopefully we'll get another one off the ground here. Talking with John, the CEO over there, and look out for future work and whatnot.
Cool, man. I know I'll be looking for it. No, I love the stuff you put out, man. And like just some of it I look at and I'm just like, man, like this is not only is it incredible, some of the stories and stuff, like I saw some of the Ukraine footage and whatnot, but the fact is that the filming of it and the quality of what comes through after post and everything, you're up there, man. You're really, you are. You can tell that you put a lot of work and pride into like that. And I'm not even going to say filmmaking. It's like cinematography. Like there's a difference. There's a difference between a filmmaker and a cinematographer. And you are definitely, you make it an art form. It's
Thank you.
really
I appreciate that. I try.
You do, man. You do. Now you can tell you're passionate about it, and you can tell that there's a lot of work that you put into it. So it's amazing stuff.
Thank you.
Ethan, man, thanks for coming on the show, talking about some of your passion and whatnot, and sharing with other people. I really appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me on.
No, anytime. There'll be another one where we're more focused on another project years down the road for sure, man.
Sounds good.
Thank you guys for tuning in for another veteran success story. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Follow and subscribe for more episodes. Honestly, guys, I can't do this without you either reviewing these episodes or, well, I mean, that too. Give it a review. But also tell a friend. Repost some of this stuff. Throw it up in your stories. Doesn't cost you anything, and I want to leave it that way. So hopefully we have some sponsors coming up soon. But that being said, Ethan Nagel has his own show going on, Into the Breach. Phenomenal show. You see him out there with others, but that's the main effort, and that's where he's headed with things. And I can't wait to see where it goes and what it evolves into. Just a heck of a job right off the bat. And, I know this is something that has been escalating over time. I'm going to put everything in the description links on how you can find out more about Ethan. I think I'm going to put something towards his Silver Star citation, along with a few other things in the description link. So make sure you check that. And also, I'm not going to hold you any longer. So follow, subscribe, tell a friend. But more importantly, stay tuned next week for yet again another veteran success story.